Supply schedules, functions, and curves, part of our Week 3 lectures on supply. In this video, we're going to talk about what firms are, what supply and quantity supplied are, and how we model supply in this class. How would you define a firm? You know, the textbook actually does not give us a definition of firm. I'd like you to just take a moment and pause the video and just write down what your best guess is before I show you what it is in the next slide. Firm is one of these things that we think we know, but maybe our definition is a little far from what the actual definition we're going to use in this class is. So take a moment. A firm is an organization that employs productive resources to obtain products and or services which are offered in the market with the aim of making a profit. And I got this from a professor at the University of Oviedo in Spain. I think that's an excellent definition, and I gave you the source there. If you want to go and look at his whole description of a firm, it's very good and I recommend it. Firms are the crucial feature of capitalism. The thing is, we talked about demand, and demand is a function of just being human. Every human has demands, no matter what system they use to allocate resources in their society. What makes capitalism capitalism is the fact that we have firms whose primary motivation is profit maximization. And it's the profit maximizing firms that really make capitalism go. In this class, we make a couple assumptions when we start modeling firms. First of all, we say that firms are solely focused on maximizing profit. Now that's a very simplistic assumption, and many economists, especially ones that study what's called industrial organization, relax that assumption and really get into what firms look like, what firms do, and how firms behave. The second assumption that we're making in this class is that firms can borrow as much as they want. So they aren't constrained the way that most consumers are constrained by budget. So firms can borrow as much as they want. They're not constrained by a budget. So what are they constrained by? Why isn't every firm just borrowing as much money as they can and producing as much as they can? Well, they're actually constrained by what we call their technology, which is their recipe they use to manufacture goods. That's a very loose definition, but it'll work for us in this class. It's the mix of inputs that are used for the firm to produce the goods it's trying to produce. So firms can choose what quantity they supply to the market. You may think that firms can also choose what price they sell at the market, but it turns out that for many markets, firms can't choose the price so much as they can choose the quantity. And you can check out video 3.3 to see why that might be the case. So the question is, what quantity will a firm supply to a market? And as chapter 1 mentions, how we determine this is that the firm will supply goods up until their marginal benefit is higher than their marginal cost, or is not below their marginal cost. So the quantity supplied depends on the price or revenue of the unit, and on the technology of the firm, and in some other factors that we're going to discuss in a later video. We illustrate the quantity supplied at various prices by using a supply schedule. And this is going to look very much like a demand schedule with a couple of important differences. So here's a supply for one firm that produces notebooks, and you can see at different prices, those are the different quantities that are supplied. And you'll notice that as the price gets higher, the firm supplies more. Whereas for demand, when the price got higher, the consumer demanded less. And so this is a firm supply schedule. We can also represent this firm supply schedule with a function, a supply function, and you see here, this is our supply function, that the quantity supplied as a function of the price turns out to be 1/2 the price. So that's the supply function. And we can also take a look at a supply curve. And here's an example of a supply curve. This supply curve does not represent the supply schedule we just used a minute ago. I just used this supply curve because, again, although we're going to draw a lot of straight line supply curves, and you're going to see a lot of straight line supply curves in your life, there's nothing that says that supply has to be straight line. And you'll see here the price on the y-axis and the quantity on the x-axis. And one of the things that I want to discuss with you now that we've seen some demand curves, and this is our first supply curve, is how to determine the quantity at a given price. What we'll do is we'll go up the price axis until we get to the price we want, and then draw a line across until we intersect the supply curve or the demand curve, and then go straight down to get to the quantity. It looks a little bit like this. So if the price is 10, we'll draw a line straight across until it hits the supply curve, and then go straight down, and we'll see at the price of 10 for this supply curve, the quantity supplied is 25. Now, we can take a firm's supply, like this one firm that supplies notebooks, and aggregate it with other notebook producers to get the aggregate supply, or what we call the market supply. And here's an example of the aggregate supply of notebooks. Again, we can have a supply schedule that has the supply of notebooks. And again, as the price goes up, the quantity that the market supplies is going to go up. And we can have a market supply function. Now you'll notice this is a capital Q rather than a lowercase q. That's a convention that I'll try to stick to, which is for an individual or firm, it's going to be lowercase q, and for the market, it's going to be a capital Q. So in this one, the quantity supplied as a function of price is 2000p plus 4000. So a firm is an organization dedicated to maximizing profit. Firms choose the quantities they supply to the market. We can represent these decisions with a firm supply curve and aggregate these supply curves into a market or aggregate supply curve. Thank you.